This is a continuation of The Variable Man by Philip K. Dick, comprising the second section of Part 4 and the end. He hurried on down the corridor, past a ruined gun and sprawled bodies still clutching blasters. Great drifting clouds of radioactive particles billowed around him. He edged by one cloud nervously. Guards lay everywhere, dying and dead, partly destroyed, eaten and corroded by the hot metallic salts in the air. He had to get out, and fast. At the end of the corridor, a whole section of the fortress was in ruins. Towering flames leaped on all sides. One of the missiles had penetrated below ground level. Cole found a lift that still functioned. A load of wounded guards was being raised to the surface. None of them paid any attention to him. Flames surged around the lift, licking at the wounded. Workmen were desperately trying to get the lift into action. Cole leaped onto the lift. A moment later, it began to rise, leaving the shouts and the flames behind. The lift emerged on the surface and Cole jumped off. A guard spotted him and gave chase. Crouching, Cole dodged into a tangled mass of twisted metal, still white-hot and smoking. He ran for a distance, leaping from the side of a ruined defense screen tower, onto the fused ground and down the side of a hill. The ground was hot underfoot. He hurried as fast as he could, gasping for breath. He came to a long slope and scrambled up the side. The guard who had followed was gone, lost behind in the rolling clouds of ash that drifted from the ruins of Sherikov's underground fortress. Cole reached the top of the hill. For a brief moment he halted to get his breath and figure where he was. It was almost evening. The sun was beginning to set. In the darkening sky, a few dots still twisted and rolled, black specks that abruptly burst into flame and fused out again. Cole stood up cautiously, peering around him. Ruins stretched out below, on all sides, the furnace from which he had escaped. A chaos of incandescent metal and debris, gutted and wrecked beyond repair, miles of tangled rubbish and half-vaporized equipment. He considered. Everyone was busy putting out the fires and pulling the wounded to safety. It would be a while before he was missed, but as soon as they realized he was gone, they'd be after him. Most of the laboratory had been destroyed. Nothing lay back that way. Beyond the ruins lay the great Ural peaks, the endless mountains, stretching out as far as the eye could see. Mountains and green forests. A wilderness. They'd never find him there. Cole started along the side of the hill, walking slowly and carefully, his screen generator under his arm. Probably in the confusion he could find enough food and equipment to last him indefinitely. He could wait until early morning, then circle back toward the ruins and load up. With a few tools and his own innate skill, he would get along fine. A screwdriver, hammer, nails, odds and ends. A great hum sounded in his ears. It swelled to a deafening roar. Startled, Cole whirled around. A vast shape filled the sky behind him, growing each moment. Cole stood frozen, utterly transfixed. The shape thundered over him, above his head, as he stood stupidly, rooted to the spot. Then, awkwardly, uncertainly, he began to run. He stumbled and fell and rolled a short distance down the side of the hill. Desperately, he struggled to hold on to the ground. His hands dug wildly, futilely, into the soft soil, trying to keep the generator under his arm at the same time. A flash, and a blinding spark of light around him. The spark picked him up and tossed him like a dry leaf. He grunted in agony as searing fire crackled about him, a blazing inferno that gnawed and ate hungrily through his screen. He spun dizzily and fell through the cloud of fire, down into a pit of darkness, a vast gulf between two hills. His wiring ripped off. The generator tore out of his grip and was lost behind. Abruptly, his force field ceased. Cole lay in the darkness at the bottom of the hill. His whole body shrieked in agony as the unholy fire played over him. He was a blazing cinder, a half-consumed ash flaming in a universe of darkness. The pain made him twist and crawl like an insect, trying to burrow into the ground. He screamed and shrieked and struggled to escape, to get away from the hideous fire, to reach the curtain of darkness beyond, where it was cool and silent, where the flames couldn't crackle and eat at him. He reached imploringly out, into the darkness, groping feebly toward it, trying to pull himself into it. Gradually, the glowing orb that was his own body faded. The impenetrable chaos of night descended. He allowed the tide to sweep over him, to extinguish the searing fire. Dixon landed his ship expertly, bringing it to a halt in front of an overturned defense tower. He leaped out and hurried across the smoking ground. From a lift, Reinhardt appeared, surrounded by his security police. "He got away from us! He escaped!" "He didn't escape," Dixon answered. "I got him myself." Reinhardt quivered violently. "What do you mean?" "Come along with me, over in this direction." He and Reinhardt climbed the side of a demolished hill, both of them panting for breath. "I was landing. I saw a figure emerge from a lift and run toward the mountains, like some sort of animal. When he came out in the open, I dived on him and released a phosphorus bomb." "Then he's dead?" "I don't see how anyone could have lived through a phosphorus bomb." They reached the top of the hill. Dixon halted, then pointed excitedly down into the pit beyond the hill. "There!" They descended cautiously. The ground was singed and burned clean. Clouds of smoke hung heavily in the air. Occasional fires still flickered here and there. Reinhardt coughed and bent over to see. Dixon flashed on a pocket flare and set it beside the body. The body was charred, half destroyed by the burning phosphorus. It lay motionless, one arm over its face, mouth open, legs sprawled grotesquely, like some abandoned rag doll tossed in an incinerator and consumed almost beyond recognition. "He's alive," Dixon muttered. He felt around curiously. Must have had some kind of protection screen. Amazing that a man could... "It's him? It's really him?" "Fits the description." Dixon tore away a handful of burned clothing. "This is the variable man. What's left of him, at least." Reinhardt sagged with relief. "Then we finally got him. The data is accurate. He's no longer a factor." Dixon got out his blaster and released the safety catch thoughtfully. "If you want, I can finish the job right now." At that moment, Sherikov appeared, accompanied by 2 armed security police. He strode grimly down the hillside, black eyes snapping. "Did Cole—" He broke off. "Good God!" "Dixon got him with a phosphorus bomb," Reinhardt said noncommittally. "He had reached the surface and was trying to get into the mountains." Sherikov turned wearily away. He was an amazing person. During the attack, he managed to force the lock on his door and escape. The guards fired at him, but nothing happened. He had rigged up some kind of force field around him, something he adapted. "Anyhow, it's over with," Reinhardt answered. "Did you have SRB plates made up on him?" Sherikov reached slowly into his coat. He drew out a manila envelope. "Here's all the information I collected about him while he was with me." "Is it complete? Everything previous has been merely fragmentary." "As near complete as I could make it. It includes photographs and diagrams of the interior of the globe, the turret wiring he did for me. I haven't had a chance even to look at them." Sherikov fingered the envelope. "What are you going to do with Cole?" "Have him loaded up, taken back to the city, and officially put to sleep by the euthanasia ministry." "Legal murder?" Sherikov's lips twisted. "Why don't you simply do it right here and get it over with?" Reinhardt grabbed the envelope and stuck it in his pocket. "I'll turn this right over to the machines." He motioned to Dixon. "Let's go. Now we can notify the fleet to prepare for the attack on Centaurus." He turned briefly back to Sherikov. "When can Icarus be launched?" "In an hour or so, I suppose. They're locking the control turret in place. Assuming it functions correctly, that's all that's needed." "Good. I'll notify Duff to send out the signal to the war fleet." Reinhardt nodded to the police to take Sherikov to the waiting security ship. Sherikov moved off dully, his face gray and haggard. Cole's inert body was picked up and tossed onto a freight cart. The cart rumbled into the hold of the security ship, and the lock slid shut after it. "It'll be interesting to see how the machines respond to the additional data," Dixon said. "It should make quite an improvement in the odds," Reinhardt agreed. He patted the envelope, bulging in his inside pocket. "We're 2 days ahead of time." Margaret Duff got up slowly from her desk. She pushed her chair automatically back. "Let me get all this straight. You mean the bomb is finished, ready to go?" Reinhardt nodded impatiently. "That's what I said. The technicians are checking the turret locks to make sure it's properly attached. The launching will take place in half an hour." 30 minutes, then the attack can begin at once. I assume the fleet is ready for action." "Of course. It's been ready for several days, but I can't believe the bomb is ready so soon." Margaret Duff moved numbly toward the door of her office. "This is a great day, Commissioner. An old era lies behind us. This time, tomorrow, Centaurus will be gone, and eventually the colonies will be ours." "It's been a long climb," Reinhardt murmured. "One thing, your charge against Sherikov. It seems incredible that a person of his caliber could ever— We'll discuss that later, Reinhardt interrupted coldly. He pulled the manila envelope from his coat. I haven't had an opportunity to feed the additional data to the SRB machines. If you'll excuse me, I'll do that now. For a moment, Margaret Duff stood at the door. The two of them faced each other silently, neither speaking. A faint smile on Reinhardt's thin lips, hostility in the woman's blue eyes. Reinhardt, sometimes I think perhaps you'll go too far. And sometimes I think you've already gone too far. I'll inform you of any change in the odds showing. Reinhardt strode past her, out of the office and down the hall. He headed toward the SRB room, an intense thalamic excitement rising up inside him. A few moments later, he entered the SRB room. He made his way to the machines. The odds 7-6 showed in the view windows. Reinhardt smiled a little. 7-6. False odds based on incorrect information. Now they could be removed. Kaplan hurried over. Reinhardt handed him the envelope and moved over to the window, gazing down at the scene below. Men and cars scurried frantically everywhere. Officials coming and going like ants, hurrying in all directions. The war was on. The signal had been sent out to the war fleet that had waited so long near Proxima Centaurus. A feeling of triumph raced through Reinhardt. He had won. He had destroyed the man from the past and broken Peter Sherikov. The war had begun as planned. Terra was breaking out. Reinhardt smiled thinly. He had been completely successful. Commissioner! Reinhardt turned slowly. All right. Kaplan was standing in front of the machines, gazing down at the reading. Commissioner! Sudden alarm plucked at Reinhardt. There was something in Kaplan's voice. He hurried quickly over. What is it? Kaplan looked up at him, his face white, his eyes wide with terror. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came. What is it? Reinhardt demanded. Chilled, he bent toward the machines, studying the reading, and sickened with horror. 100-1 against Terra. He could not tear his gaze away from the figures. He was numb, shocked with disbelief. 101. What had happened? What had gone wrong? The turret was finished. Icarus was ready. The fleet had been notified. There was a sudden deep buzz from outside the building. Shouts drifted up from below. Reinhardt turned his head slowly toward the window, his heart frozen with fear. Across the evening sky, a trail moved, rising each moment. A thin line of white. Something climbed, gaining speed each moment. On the ground, all eyes were turned toward it, awed faces peering up. The object gained speed, faster and faster. Then it vanished. Icarus was on his way. The attack had begun. It was too late to stop now. And on the machines, the odds read 100-1 for failure. At 8 o'clock in the evening of May 15th, 2136, Icarus was launched toward the star Centaurus. A day later, while all Terra waited, Icarus entered the star, traveling at thousands of times the speed of light. Nothing happened. Icarus disappeared into the star. There was no explosion. The bomb failed to go off. At the same time, the Terran warfleet engaged the Centauran outer fleet, sweeping down in a concentrated attack. 20 major ships were seized. A good part of the Centauran fleet was destroyed. Many of the captive systems began to revolt, in the hope of throwing off the Imperial bonds. 2 hours later, the massed Centauran warfleet from Armun abruptly appeared and joined battle. The great struggle illuminated half the Centauran system. Ship after ship flashed briefly and then faded to ash. For a whole day, the two fleets fought, strung out over millions of miles of space. Innumerable fighting men died on both sides. At last, the remains of the battered Terran fleet turned and limped toward Armun, defeated. Little of the once impressive armada remained. A few blackened hulks making their way uncertainly toward captivity. Icarus had not functioned. Centaurus had not exploded. The attack was a failure. The war was over. We've lost the war, Margaret Duff said in a small voice, wondering and awed. It's over. Finished. The council members sat in their places around the conference table, gray-haired elderly men, none of them speaking or moving. All gazed up mutely at the great stellar maps that covered 2 walls of the chamber. I have already empowered negotiators to arrange a truce, Margaret Duff murmured. Orders have been sent out to Vice Commander Jessup to give up the battle. There's no hope. Fleet Commander Carlton destroyed himself and his flagship a few minutes ago. The Centauran High Council has agreed to end the fighting. Their whole empire is rotten to the core, ready to topple of its own weight. Reinhardt was slumped over at the table, his head in his hands. I don't understand. Why? Why didn't the bomb explode? He mopped his forehead shakily. All his poise was gone. He was trembling and broken. What went wrong? Gray-faced, Dixon mumbled an answer. The variable man must have sabotaged the turret. The SRB machines knew. They analyzed the data. They knew, but it was too late. Reinhardt's eyes were bleak with despair as he raised his head a little. I knew he'd destroy us. We're finished. A century of work and planning. His body knotted in a spasm of furious agony. All because of Sherikov. Margaret Duff eyed Reinhardt coldly. Why, because of Sherikov? He kept Cole alive. I wanted him killed from the start. Suddenly, Reinhardt jumped from his chair. His hand clutched convulsively at his gun. And he's still alive. Even if we've lost, I'm going to have the pleasure of putting a blast beam through Cole's chest. Sit down, Margaret Duff ordered. Reinhardt was halfway to the door. He's still at the euthanasia ministry, waiting for the official... No, he's not, Margaret Duff said. Reinhardt froze. He turned slowly, as if unable to believe his senses. What? Cole isn't at the ministry. I ordered him transferred and your instructions canceled. Where is he? There was unusual hardness in Margaret Duff's voice as she answered. With Peter Sherikov, in the Urals. I had Sherikov's full authority restored. I then had Cole transferred there, put in Sherikov's safekeeping. I want to make sure Cole recovers so we can keep our promise to him, our promise to return him to his own time. Reinhardt's mouth opened and closed. All the color had drained from his face. His cheek muscles twitched spasmodically. At last, he managed to speak. You've gone insane, the traitor responsible for Earth's greatest defeat. We have lost the war, Margaret Duff stated quietly. But this is not a day of defeat. It is a day of victory, the most incredible victory Terra has ever had. Reinhardt and Dixon were dumbfounded. What? Reinhardt gasped. What do you... The whole room was in an uproar. All the council members were on their feet. Reinhardt's words were drowned out. Sherikov will explain when he gets here. Margaret Duff's calm voice came. He's the one who discovered it. She looked around the chamber at the incredulous council members. Everyone stay in his seat. You are all to remain here until Sherikov arrives. It's vital you hear what he has to say. His news transforms this whole situation. Peter Sherikov accepted the briefcase of papers from his armed technician. Thanks. He pushed his chair back and glanced thoughtfully around the council chamber. Is everybody ready to hear what I have to say? We're ready, Margaret Duff answered. The council members sat alertly around the table. At the far end, Reinhardt and Dixon watched uneasily as the big Pole removed papers from his briefcase and carefully examined them. To begin, I recall to you the original work behind the FTL bomb. Jameson Hedge was the first human to propel an object at a speed greater than light. As you know, that object diminished in length and gained in mass as it moved toward light speed. When it reached that speed, it vanished. It ceased to exist in our terms. Having no length, it could not occupy space. It rose to a different order of existence. When Hedge tried to bring the object back, an explosion occurred. Hedge was killed, and all his equipment was destroyed. The force of the blast was beyond calculation. Hedge had placed his observation ship many millions of miles away. It was not far enough, however. Originally, he had hoped his drive might be used for space travel, but after his death, the principle was abandoned. That is, until Icarus. I saw the possibilities of a bomb, an incredibly powerful bomb, to destroy Centaurus and all the Empire's forces. The reappearance of Icarus would mean the annihilation of their system. As Hedge had shown, the object would re-enter space already occupied by matter, and the cataclysm would be beyond belief. But Icarus never came back, Reinhardt cried. Cole altered the wiring so the bomb kept on going. It's probably still going. Wrong, Sherikov boomed. The bomb did reappear, but it didn't explode. Reinhardt reacted violently. You mean... The bomb came back, dropping below the FTL speed as soon as it entered the star Proxima. But it did not explode. There was no cataclysm. It reappeared and was absorbed by the sun, turned into gas at once. "Why didn't it explode?" Dixon demanded. "Because Thomas Cole solved Hedge's problem. He found a way to bring the FTL object back into this universe without collision, without an explosion. The variable man found what Hedge was after." The whole council was on its feet. A growing murmur filled the chamber, a rising pandemonium breaking out on all sides. "I don't believe it," Reinhardt gasped. "It isn't possible. If Cole solved Hedge's problem, that would mean—" He broke off, staggered. "Faster-than-light drive can now be used for space travel," Sherikov continued, waving the noise down. "As Hedge intended, my men have studied the photographs of the control turret. They don't know how or why yet, but we have complete records of the turret. We can duplicate the wiring as soon as the laboratories have been repaired." Comprehension was gradually beginning to settle over the room. "Then it'll be possible to build FTL ships," Margaret Duff murmured, dazed. "And if we can do that—" When I showed him the control turret, Cole understood its purpose. Not my purpose, but the original purpose Hedge had been working toward. Cole realized Icarus was actually an incomplete spaceship, not a bomb at all. He saw what Hedge had seen, an FTL space drive. He set out to make Icarus work. "We can go beyond Centaurus," Dixon muttered, his lips twisted. "Then the war was trivial. We can leave the Empire completely behind. We can go beyond the galaxy." "The whole universe is open to us," Sherikov agreed. "Instead of taking over an antiquated empire, we have the entire cosmos to map and explore, God's total creation." Margaret Duff got to her feet and moved slowly toward the great stellar maps that towered above them at the far end of the chamber. She stood for a long time, gazing up at the myriad suns, the legions of systems, awed by what she saw. "Do you suppose he realized all this?" she asked suddenly. "What we can see here on these maps?" "Thomas Cole is a strange person," Sherikov said, half to himself. "Apparently he has a kind of intuition about machines, the way things are supposed to work. An intuition more in his hands than in his head. A kind of genius, such as a painter or a pianist has. Not a scientist. He has no verbal knowledge about things, no semantic references. He deals with the things themselves, directly." I doubt very much if Thomas Cole understood what would come about. He looked into the globe, the control turret. He saw unfinished wiring and relays. He saw a job half done, an incomplete machine. "Something to be fixed," Margaret Duff put in. "Something to be fixed. Like an artist, he saw his work ahead of him. He was interested in only one thing, turning out the best job he could with the skill he possessed. For us, that skill has opened up a whole universe, endless galaxies and systems to explore, worlds without end. Unlimited, untouched worlds." Reinhardt got unsteadily to his feet. "We better get to work. Start organizing construction teams, exploration crews. We'll have to reconvert from war production to ship designing, begin the manufacture of mining and scientific instruments for survey work." "That's right," Margaret Duff said. She looked reflectively up at him. "But you're not going to have anything to do with it." Reinhardt saw the expression on her face. His hand flew to his gun, and he backed quickly toward the door. Dixon leaped up and joined him. "Get back!" Reinhardt shouted. Margaret Duff signaled, and a phalanx of government troops closed in around the two men, grim-faced, efficient soldiers with magnetic grapples ready. Reinhardt's blaster wavered, toward the council members sitting shocked in their seats, and toward Margaret Duff, straight at her blue eyes. Reinhardt's features were distorted with insane fear. "Get back! Don't anybody come near me or she'll be the first to get it." Peter Sherikov slid from the table and with one great stride swept his immense bulk in front of Reinhardt. His huge black-furred fist rose in a smashing arc. Reinhardt sailed against the wall, struck with ringing force, and then slid slowly to the floor. The government troops threw their grapples quickly around him and jerked him to his feet. His body was frozen rigid, blood dripped from his mouth. He spat bits of tooth, his eyes glazed over. Dixon stood dazed, mouth open, uncomprehending, as the grapples closed around his arms and legs. Reinhardt's gun skidded to the floor as he was yanked toward the door. One of the elderly council members picked the gun up and examined it curiously. He laid it carefully on the table. "Fully loaded," he murmured, "ready to fire." Reinhardt's battered face was dark with hate. "I should have killed all of you. All of you!" An ugly sneer twisted across his shredded lips. "If I could get my hands loose—" "You won't," Margaret Duff said. "You might as well not even bother to think about it." She signaled to the troops, and they pulled Reinhardt and Dixon roughly out of the room, two dazed figures, snarling and resentful. For a moment, the room was silent. Then the council members shuffled nervously in their seats, beginning to breathe again. Sherikov came over and put his big paw on Margaret Duff's shoulder. "Are you all right, Margaret?" She smiled faintly. "I'm fine, thanks." Sherikov touched her soft hair briefly. Then he broke away and began to pack up his briefcase busily. "I have to go. I'll get in touch with you later." "Where are you going?" she asked hesitantly. "Can't you stay and—" "I have to get back to the Urals." Sherikov grinned at her over his bushy black beard as he headed out of the room. Some very important business to attend to. Thomas Cole was sitting up in bed when Sherikov came to the door. Most of his awkward, hunched-over body was sealed in a thin envelope of transparent airproof plastic. Two robot attendants whirred ceaselessly at his side, their leads contacting his pulse, blood pressure, respiration, body temperature. Cole turned a little as the huge pole tossed down his briefcase and seated himself on the window ledge. "How are you feeling?" Sherikov asked him. "Better. You see, we've quite advanced therapy. Your burns should be healed in a few months. How is the war coming?" "The war is over." Cole's lips moved. Icarus went as expected. As you expected." Sherikov leaned toward the bed. "Cole, I promised you something. I mean to keep my promise, as soon as you're well enough." "To return me to my own time?" "That's right. It's a relatively simple matter, now that Reinhardt has been removed from power. You'll be back home again, back in your own time, your own world. We can supply you with some discs of platinum, or something of the kind, to finance your business. You'll need a new fix-it truck, tools, and clothes. A few $1,000s ought to do it." Cole was silent. "I've already contacted Histo Research," Sherikov continued. "The time bubble is ready as soon as you are. We're somewhat beholden to you, as you probably realize. You've made it possible for us to actualize our greatest dream. The whole planet is seething with excitement. We're changing our economy over from war to—" "They don't resent what happened? The dud must have made an awful lot of people feel downright bad." "At first, but they got over it, as soon as they understood what was ahead. Too bad you won't be here to see it, Cole. A whole world breaking loose, bursting out into the universe. They want me to have an FTL ship ready by the end of the week. Thousands of applications are already on file, men and women wanting to get in on the initial flight." Cole smiled a little. "There won't be any band there, no parade or welcoming committee waiting for them." "Maybe not. Maybe the first ship will wind up on some dead world, nothing but sand and dried salt. But everybody wants to go. It's almost like a holiday. People running around and shouting and throwing things in the streets. Afraid I must get back to the labs. Lots of reconstruction work being started." Sherikov dug into his bulging briefcase. "By the way, one little thing. While you're recovering here, you might like to look at these." He tossed a handful of schematics on the bed. Cole picked them up slowly. "What's this?" "Just a little thing I designed." Sherikov arose and lumbered toward the door. "We're realigning our political structure to eliminate any recurrence of the Reinhardt affair. This will block any more one-man power grabs." He jabbed a thick finger at the schematics. "It'll turn power over to all of us, not to just a limited number one person could dominate, the way Reinhardt dominated the council. This gimmick makes it possible for citizens to raise and decide issues directly. They won't have to wait for the council to verbalize a measure. Any citizen can transmit his will with one of these, make his needs register on a central control that automatically responds. When a large enough segment of the population wants a certain thing done, these little gadgets set up an active field that touches all the others. An issue won't have to go through a formal council. The citizens can express their will long before any bunch of gray-haired old men could get around to it." Sherikov broke off, frowning. "Of course," he continued slowly. "There's one little detail." "What's that?" "I haven't been able to get a model to function. A few bugs. Such intricate work never was in my line." He paused at the door. "Well, I hope I'll see you again before you go. Maybe if you feel well enough later on, we could get together for one last talk. Maybe have dinner together sometime, eh?" But Thomas Cole wasn't listening. He was bent over the schematics, an intense frown on his weathered face. His long fingers moved restlessly over the schematics, tracing wiring and terminals. His lips moved as he calculated. Sherikov waited a moment. Then he stepped out into the hall and softly closed the door after him. He whistled merrily as he strode off down the corridor. The end. Best Audiobooks for Free hopes that you have enjoyed this production of The Variable Man by Philip K. Dick. Please subscribe to our channel on YouTube and Rumble, as your subscription is the support we need to create more great free content. Please look to our website at bestaudiobooksforfree.com for a complete list of our audiobooks.